Imagine finding out that the person you love most has been lying to you for months. You thought you knew them. You thought you had everything. But when the truth hits, it leaves you paralyzed, emotionally and physically. What if you discovered that your spouse had been cheating on you? Not with someone from work, not with a stranger, but with someone you never expected. And when you confront them, the pain is so intense you can't even walk for 2 days. Stay tuned because this heart-wrenching betrayal will leave you breathless. This is a story you can't miss. Sophia thought her life was perfect. She had a loving husband, a beautiful home, and 2 wonderful children. Her marriage to Mark had been built on years of trust and shared dreams. From the outside, they were the ideal couple, the kind of family that everyone envied. But deep inside, Sophia had started to feel something she couldn't quite explain, a sense of unease, a feeling that something was off, even though she couldn't pinpoint what it was. At first, the changes were subtle. Mark had started working late more often, claiming it was for a big project at work. His texts became shorter, his calls more infrequent. But Sophia didn't want to jump to conclusions. She trusted him completely, and the thought that he might be cheating never crossed her mind. But then the little things began to pile up. He stopped being affectionate, stopped making time for their date nights, and even started avoiding eye contact. Sophia told herself it was just stress from work, but the nagging feeling that something wasn't right kept growing. One evening, after Mark had once again come home late, smelling of cologne that wasn't his usual scent, Sophia felt her heart race. She had always believed that trust was the foundation of a marriage, but her intuition was telling her that something had changed. She needed to know the truth. As Mark showered and changed into his usual pajamas, Sophia made the decision to confront him. She had no concrete evidence, just a growing suspicion, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to ask him outright. When he came into the living room, she was sitting on the couch, her mind racing. She couldn't sit in silence anymore. It was time to find out if her suspicions were valid. "Mark," Sophia started, her voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk." He froze, sensing the seriousness in her tone. He tried to smile, but there was something about the way he did it that made her stomach turn. "What's going on, Soph?" he asked, sitting next to her on the couch. Sophia took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She had never imagined she would be in this position, but now that she was, she had to face it. "I don't know. I just feel like something is wrong. You've been distant lately. You've been working late more often, and you've stopped talking to me the way you used to. I need to know what's going on." Mark's face immediately fell. The smile he had tried to force was gone, replaced by guilt. Sophia could see it in his eyes. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't even trying to deny it. The truth was coming, and there was no hiding from it. I didn't want to hurt you, Soph," Mark whispered, his voice barely audible. "I've been seeing someone else. I've been having an affair for the last few months. I never meant for it to happen, but it did." The words hit Sophia like a punch to the stomach. She couldn't breathe. The room started spinning, her vision blurred as she struggled to process what he had just said. Her mind couldn't comprehend it. Mark, her husband, the man she trusted above all others, had betrayed her. The man she had shared her life with had been lying to her, hiding a secret so deep that it shattered everything they had built together. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," Mark said, reaching out for her hand, but she pulled away. The pain in her chest was unbearable. She couldn't even look at him anymore. She had trusted him with her heart, with her future, and he had destroyed it all. Tears filled her eyes, and as they spilled down her face, her body trembled with shock and disbelief. "How could you do this?" she choked out, her voice breaking. "How could you betray me like this? I loved you. We had everything." The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in around her. Her legs felt weak, and suddenly she couldn't stand. She collapsed onto the floor, her sobs echoing in the empty room. Mark knelt beside her, trying to comfort her, but she couldn't feel his touch. The pain was too much. She felt as if she had been gutted, as if her entire world had fallen apart in an instant. For the next 2 days, Sophia couldn't bring herself to leave her bed. She couldn't walk, couldn't eat, couldn't think. The pain of betrayal was so deep, so consuming, that she physically couldn't move. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of Mark's confession played over and over in her mind. She had been betrayed by the one person she had trusted most. Her body was exhausted from the grief, from the weight of the emotional burden she carried. She wanted to scream, to lash out, to make him feel the pain he had caused her. But all she could do was lie there, immobilized by the overwhelming hurt. She didn't know how to move forward. She didn't know how to trust again. All she knew was that her life had been irrevocably changed in that single, heart-wrenching moment. The days following the confrontation felt like a blur for Sophia. She had never imagined that betrayal could physically incapacitate her, but it had. She spent the next 2 days in a fog of despair, unable to get out of bed. The emotional weight of what had happened consumed her entire being. She couldn't walk, not because of physical injury, but because the emotional devastation left her paralyzed. It was like her body had been struck by a force she couldn't control, a force that had shattered everything she had believed in. Mark had tried to talk to her, tried to apologize, but Sophia couldn't bring herself to listen. His words were nothing but hollow promises. He had been lying to her for months, and no amount of apology could take away the deep wound that had been inflicted on her soul. He told her he loved her and that he regretted his actions, but those words meant nothing to her now. How could love coexist with betrayal? How could trust be rebuilt when it had been destroyed so completely? The silence in the house was deafening. She didn't know how to face him, how to live in the same space with someone who had deceived her in such a painful way. But more than that, she didn't know how to live with herself. The life she had known, the life she had so carefully built, had come crashing down in an instant. She had given Mark everything, and he had taken it all for granted. The life she had trusted, the love she had nurtured, was now shattered beyond repair. She felt as if she had lost a part of herself, the part that had believed in love and loyalty. Sophia knew she couldn't continue living like this. She couldn't stay in the same house with Mark, pretending that everything was okay. The weight of the betrayal was too heavy to bear. So she made the decision to leave. It wasn't easy. The thought of uprooting her life, of walking away from everything she had known, terrified her. But she had no choice. She couldn't stay. She couldn't live in the same space as the man who had destroyed her trust. It was time to move on, to start over. That evening, she packed a small bag, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't know where she was going or what she was going to do, but she knew that she couldn't stay in this house any longer. As she walked out of the front door, she felt the weight of her decision, but also a strange sense of relief. For the first time in days, she could breathe. She was free from the suffocating pain of betrayal. But the road ahead was still uncertain. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she had to take this first step, no matter how painful it was. Sophia ended up at her sister Rachel's apartment. It wasn't much, but it was a safe haven, a place where she could think without the constant reminder of Mark and the life they had shared. Rachel was there for her, offering support without judgment. Sophia didn't want to talk about what had happened. Not yet. The pain was still too raw. But Rachel didn't push her to open up. She simply let her be, knowing that Sophia needed time to process everything on her own terms. For the first few days, Sophia stayed in a fog of exhaustion and grief. She barely ate, barely slept. Her body felt weak, as though it too was grieving the life she had lost. She kept thinking about Mark, about their years together, about the promises they had made to each other. But then she thought about the affair, the lies, the betrayal. She couldn't get past it. It consumed her, even in the quiet moments when she tried to escape the pain. She wanted answers. She wanted to know how he could do this to her. But deep down, she knew that there would never be a satisfactory answer. There would never be a way to justify what he had done. The emotional numbness slowly started to wear off. Sophia realized that she had to face her pain head on. She couldn't hide from it anymore. She had to allow herself to grieve, to process the betrayal and the loss. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick, but it was the only way forward. One night, as she sat on the couch, staring out the window, the reality of her situation began to sink in. She was alone. She had been betrayed by the one person she trusted the most. But she wasn't defeated. She had survived this far, and she was going to survive what came next. The road ahead might be long, but she knew she was strong enough to walk it. She might not be able to walk right now, but eventually she would. The pain would eventually subside, and in time, she would rebuild. She had to believe that. She had to believe that the future held something better than this moment of heartbreak. The healing process had begun. It was time to move forward, one step at a time. The first few weeks after leaving Mark felt like a fog. Sophia had never felt so lost, so broken. Her thoughts seemed to be on a never-ending loop, cycling between the pain of betrayal and the deep sorrow of the life she had just left behind. There were days when she couldn't bring herself to get out of bed, days when the grief felt too heavy to bear. But as the weeks wore on, something began to shift. Slowly, the fog started to clear, and a faint glimmer of hope began to emerge. Sophia had always prided herself on being independent, on being someone who could handle anything life threw her way. But now she was confronted with a harsh truth. She wasn't sure who she was without Mark. For so many years, her identity had been intertwined with him. She had dedicated herself to their marriage, to their family, and now she felt like a part of her had been erased. It was like waking up one morning to find that the life you had built was gone, and you had no idea where to start rebuilding. But as the days went by, Sophia started to realize something important. She didn't need Mark to define her. She was more than just his wife. She was Sophia, strong, capable, and deserving of a life filled with love, trust, and happiness. It wasn't going to be easy, but she had survived the worst of the pain, and now she was ready to move forward. She started taking small steps to rediscover herself. She enrolled in a cooking class, something she had always wanted to try but never had the time for. She spent afternoons at the park reading books she had put down years ago. She reconnected with old friends who had been there for her, offering support and encouragement. Slowly, she began to rebuild her sense of self, piece by piece. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live in the present and building a future that was her own. One afternoon, Sophia received a phone call from Mark. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw his name on the screen, but she didn't let it faze her. She had been through the worst of the pain, and she wasn't going to let him control her emotions anymore. She picked up the phone and took a deep breath. "Hello?" she answered, her voice steady, but with a hint of weariness. "Hi, Sophia." Mark's voice came through, sounding softer than usual. "I know we haven't talked in a while, but I've been doing a lot of thinking. I want to apologize again for everything I've done. I know I've hurt you, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I want you to know that I've been seeing a therapist. I'm trying to understand what happened, and I'm doing everything I can to become a better person." Sophia listened to him, feeling the old pangs of guilt rising within her. She wanted to believe his words, to believe that he was truly remorseful. But she had heard it all before. The apologies, the promises, the pleas for forgiveness. She had given him everything, and it had still ended in betrayal. She had given him the benefit of the doubt for years, and look where it had gotten her. "Mark," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I appreciate that you're working on yourself, but that doesn't change what happened. I can't keep going back to someone who has hurt me so deeply. I can't keep living in a cycle of lies and broken promises. I've already forgiven you, not for you, but for myself. But I can't keep holding on to something that no longer exists." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Sophia thought he might say something else, something to change her mind. But then he sighed, and she could hear the sadness in his voice. "I understand, Sophia. I wish things had turned out differently. You deserved so much more than I gave you." "I know," she whispered, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I did, and I gave you everything I had. But I can't do it anymore." They talked for a few more minutes, but the conversation felt hollow. The reality had set in. There was no going back. She had let go of him, and it was time for her to move forward. Mark was part of her past now, a chapter she had closed, and there was no place for him in her future. After the call ended, Sophia sat in silence for a while, letting the weight of it all sink in. It hurt. It still hurt. But it was a different kind of hurt now. It wasn't the raw pain of betrayal anymore. It was the pain of letting go, of accepting that some things couldn't be fixed. She had forgiven Mark, but that didn't mean she had to go back. She had learned to love herself, to prioritize her own well-being, and that was more important than anything else. The next morning, Sophia woke up feeling different. She didn't feel the weight of the past dragging her down. She felt lighter, freer, more in control of her own life. It wasn't going to be easy, and she knew there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future. She was stronger than she had been before. She was ready to take the next step on her own terms. Sophia's new routine was nothing short of liberating. It wasn't just about the physical changes, moving into a smaller apartment, rearranging her home, but about the emotional liberation she felt every day. She had learned to fill her life with things that brought her joy, and it didn't revolve around Mark anymore. It wasn't an instant transformation, and she still had her moments of weakness, but slowly she was becoming the person she had always wanted to be, the person who was strong, independent, and whole on her own. The first few weeks were difficult. She found herself lying awake at night, her mind drifting back to the memories of her marriage, the laughter they shared, and the promises they had made. She remembered when everything had felt so perfect, when the thought of betrayal had been unthinkable. It was hard not to wish for that kind of connection again, even though she knew that it had been a lie. But each time she found herself thinking of Mark, the weight of his betrayal returned, and she was reminded of why she had to move on. She realized that she had spent too many years focused on someone else's happiness, too many years putting someone else first. Now it was her turn to put herself first. The moments of self-doubt began to fade as she discovered her own strength. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. One afternoon, she went to a local coffee shop she had always liked but had never had the time to visit. It was a place where she could sit quietly, sip her coffee, and enjoy the atmosphere. As she sat at a window table, watching the people walk by, she began to feel the weight lifting from her chest. She was no longer tied to the past, no longer clinging to the man who had hurt her. She was creating a life for herself, one that was filled with new experiences, new opportunities, and the possibility of a future she had never imagined. It was at that moment that she realized how far she had come. She wasn't afraid of the future anymore. She had spent so much time worrying about what would happen, about what Mark's betrayal would do to her, but now she was embracing the uncertainty. She no longer felt controlled by fear. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. Sophia also realized that she didn't need to rush into anything. Her life wasn't incomplete because of Mark's betrayal. She didn't need someone else to make her feel whole. She had spent so many years thinking she couldn't live without him, but now she saw that she was capable of living without anyone but herself. She wasn't in a hurry to jump into a new relationship. If love came her way, it would be because she was ready, not because she was trying to fill a void. Her friends, especially Rachel, were amazed by the transformation they saw in Sophia. She was more confident, more alive. She no longer hesitated when it came to making decisions or standing up for herself. She was becoming the woman she had always wanted to be, and that woman didn't need anyone's approval. It wasn't about proving something to anyone else. It was about proving to herself that she was worthy of happiness, love, and respect. One evening, after a long day at work, Sophia sat down to write in her journal, something she had taken up recently to help her process her feelings. She had written about her anger, her sadness, her moments of weakness, but this time, the words that came to her were different. She wrote about the strength she had found in herself, about how she had learned to forgive, not just Mark, but herself as well. She had blamed herself for too long, convinced herself that she hadn't been enough. But now she realized that none of it had been her fault. She had given her heart to someone who didn't value it, but that didn't mean she was any less worthy of love. "I am enough," she wrote, as the words filled the page. "I am stronger than I ever knew. I don't need anyone to complete me. I am complete." As the ink dried on the page, Sophia felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had come so far, and she was proud of the woman she was becoming. She wasn't defined by Mark's betrayal or by the mistakes she had made. She was defined by her resilience, by her ability to rise above the pain and create a life she could be proud of. She wasn't looking for closure anymore. She had found it within herself. The following weeks brought new challenges, as life always does. There were moments when the past crept back into her thoughts, but each time, Sophia faced it with a newfound strength. She had learned how to navigate the pain, how to move forward with grace, and how to trust that the future held something better. She didn't know what that future looked like, but she was ready for it. Sophia had finally come to realize that the end of her marriage wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of something new, a journey she was now walking on her own terms. As time went on, Sophia's life began to shift in ways she hadn't anticipated. She still had her moments of doubt, still had those fleeting moments when memories of Mark surfaced. Sometimes she would hear a song that reminded her of their time together, or see a couple walking hand in hand, and for a brief moment, the loneliness would creep in. But those moments were becoming fewer and farther between. The deep, suffocating pain of betrayal was no longer the overwhelming force it had once been. She was finding peace in the quiet moments, and even in her moments of solitude, she began to appreciate the strength she had found in herself. Sophia's confidence began to grow. The woman who had once been paralyzed by her own emotions, who had once felt lost and broken, was slowly reclaiming herself. She had become a woman who could stand on her own 2 feet, who could face the world with her head held high. The old Sophia, the one who had defined herself by her marriage, by her role as a wife, was starting to fade away. In her place, a stronger, more independent version of herself was emerging. One day, while visiting a local art gallery with Rachel, Sophia was struck by how much she had changed. The last time she had visited the gallery, she had been with Mark, and the visit had been marred by the tension between them, the unspoken words and frustrations that had built up in their marriage. But this time, as she wandered through the gallery, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She wasn't trying to make anyone else happy anymore. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was there because she loved art, because she enjoyed the quiet contemplation it brought her. Rachel, noticing the shift in Sophia's energy, couldn't help but comment. "You're different now, Soph. I can see it. You've let go of so much, and it shows. You're glowing." Sophia smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I think I'm finally learning to love myself again," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I spent so many years giving pieces of myself to Mark, thinking that if I loved him enough, everything would be perfect. But now I realize that I need to love myself first. I need to be my own priority." Rachel wrapped her arm around Sophia's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you. You've come such a long way. You deserve all the happiness in the world, and I know you're going to find it." Sophia felt a surge of warmth at her friend's words. It was true. For the first time in months, she felt like she was standing on solid ground. She didn't need anyone else to complete her. She had already done that for herself. One afternoon, a few weeks later, Sophia received a call from her lawyer. The divorce papers were ready to be signed. Her heart raced, but it wasn't out of fear or sadness. It was out of relief. The end of her marriage to Mark had been long overdue, and now it was finally official. She knew this chapter of her life was closing, and she was ready for the next one. She had spent so many years holding on to a relationship that wasn't meant to be. Now she could finally let go. When she arrived at the lawyer's office, she sat down to sign the papers, her hands steady as she wrote her name. As she looked at the finality of the documents, a sense of peace washed over her. She wasn't leaving anything behind. She was moving forward. As she left the office, Sophia took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future. She wasn't waiting for something to change. She wasn't waiting for Mark to apologize or for some grand gesture to make things right. She had already moved on. She had already healed. Sophia knew there would be challenges ahead, that there would be moments of doubt, but she was ready. She had learned to embrace her own strength. She had learned that love, real love, started with loving herself first. She was no longer defined by her marriage, by her betrayal, or by the man who had left her heartbroken. She was defined by her resilience, by the woman she had become. As she walked down the street, the cool breeze brushing against her face, Sophia smiled. She was free. Free to live, to love, and to create a future that was all her own. And for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace.